So, I wanted to talk about a few things that are on my mind. It's not an astrology topic, but there might be some astrological thoughts that come out anyway. Who knows? But I just wanted to kind of get a few thoughts across that have been kind of in my mind. So, I've had a few like incidents recently where, like over a long period of time, actually, where I feel like um, people kind of lack compassion, and it's like I try to be compassionate about them not having compassion, if that makes sense. Like, for example, somebody that I talk to online sometimes said that, like, I can't help being a cold person because that's who I am. And it made me think, because like obviously that makes sense in a way, because if you think about it, some people have different kinds of personalities from me, obviously, and so they've maybe been hardened by from life and from their experiences. But it's like I also think that I'm allowed to have my own perspective, and so my perspective is that that there is a lack of compassion in the world. And I've had a lot of sort of interactions over the past while where people clearly show that, like, they lack compassion and understanding for me or for others. And it just made me wonder about things in general, because it's like, for example, I've been thinking a lot about how, and this is something that I kind of use as a reference point to like other situations. But I used to be a vegetarian for a while, and it didn't fully work out by the end. It's kind of harder now to be one with the situation that I'm living in, with people kind of cooking meat and stuff, and it's just harder. But I was a vegetarian for a while, and there was somebody in my life who would make judgmental comments about me being a vegetarian, and would almost get angry at me being a vegetarian. And it's just kind of with the personality that I have, it kind of confuses me, because it's kind of like, well, I start to think, well, like, you tell me that I'm allowed to have my own preferences, and I should express myself and not care about what people think, but then you're also forcing your thoughts onto me. Because, for example, one time when this person was cooking dinner, and I was at his house, he would like, I asked him specifically, that this was a while ago, but I just kind of used it as a reference point to kind of help me understand or help me explain. I asked him specifically that, I'll just have the veg and the salad, please. I said it very calmly, probably twice, I'd say I said it. And he said, yeah, sure. But then when he was serving up, of course he served me meat. The meat was on the plate. And I didn't say anything, because I'm kind of perceptive enough to kind of realize that, like, well, if I say something, it might just turn into a big fight, because that had kind of happened before in similar situations. So I didn't say anything. But it's kind of like, it feels almost like an attack on, like, my own personal choices, that, like, you tell me, this person, let's say, told me that, oh, you don't have to care about what people think of you, and you don't have to you don't have to mind what other people say. But then you're also forcing what you think onto me in a physical way, like you're physically serving me meat. Like, he knew what he was doing. He didn't agree with me being a vegetarian, so he decided, oh, I don't care about this, so I'm just going to serve him meat anyway. So it's like, how can somebody ignore what people say when people are forcing what they think onto you like that? And it just confuses me, because I'm a thinker kind of person, and so I kind of try to see from different angles, and I do usually see from different perceptions and angles, and I do understand other people's perspectives as well. But in this case, it's kind of like, you tell me one thing, but then you contradict that by saying by doing the opposite. So if somebody is saying, like, oh, just be yourself and you don't have to care what people think of you, but it's like empty words if you're not actually carrying out actions that support that theory. So if you're serving me meat when you knew that I was a vegetarian, it's kind of like, well, what am I supposed to believe then? And there were other very similar incidents about sort of like the movies that I watched, the music that I listened to, that he would kind of ostracize me for my taste. And I realized that like I also have to think of it in terms of like, well, I realized that it's more something to do with him, that he has certain limitations in his thinking or in his perception, that in his mind he thinks that like I'm like strange or unusual for like my tastes or whatever. But if you're my friend, he was my friend, then wouldn't you want to just accept like the person the way that they are? And it makes me wonder like, well, where do I go to meet people that are actually accepting of me and who actually like have similar tastes or similar views, because that makes you feel safe in the world. Like on some level I do want to feel safe. I don't want to just be on my own, in my own corner with my own interests, and not have anybody else support that or anybody else in a similar viewpoint or have similar tastes. It goes to show that like being friends with people who are similar to you is easier than being friends with people who are not similar to you. Because on the one hand, I enjoy talking to people who are different from me and who have different ideas on things. I enjoy that. But after a while, it can become challenging, and it can become like there's a limitation placed on your friendship because you're not seeing things from the similar viewpoint. So you're like, one person might like judge the other in a way that like you kind of take it to heart, because I can't help sometimes but take things to heart. So if somebody says something to me and it's a constant pattern of this person saying things to me that shows that they're judging my decisions or my choices or my viewpoints or my tastes, then I will take it to heart, because it's confusing. It's confusing because he would be like, well, don't care about what I say to you and don't care about what people think. But it's like, I can't block that out completely because that's just rude. And I can't just block it out completely. And so if you're telling me that like you're allowed to think how you think and watch what you watch and think what you think and, just be who you are, but then you're contradicting that by sort of by saying, well, you're actually a weirdo for liking these things or whatever, or you're a weirdo for being a vegetarian, so I'm going to serve you meat or whatever. Like, that's just not, it's kind of disrespectful, and it's just like, what am I supposed to do with that? It's kind of like, well, I'm supposed to believe that I don't have to care about what people think, but then I'm also supposed to listen to what people think. And I want to listen on some level, of course, to what people think and what people have to say. But where do you draw the line between, well, listening to people and taking some of their advice on board and like what you're not supposed to take on board? Like, how do you differentiate between what is something that you can actually trust and listen to and take on board, and something that is just something that people say and you don't have to care about that part? Because sometimes it is hard to differentiate between these things. Like, what people say to me, am I supposed to believe this information or not? Because he probably on some level wants me to listen to him and like take what he says on board, because he doesn't agree with what I'm doing or me being a vegetarian or whatever. But then he also says, well, don't care about anything that people say and just do you. But then it's like, well, it just gets in your head, and it's confusing, because if people say one thing but then they do something else, and of course I've done this as well, I'm not perfect either, but it's like, in my experience, that's how I perceive a lot of interactions, is that people say one thing but then they will contradict that by doing the opposite. So they will say, believe in yourself, be yourself, do what you want to do, but then they say, no, do these things and watch these movies and like eat these foods. So it just gets really confusing. And I just wanted to kind of talk about that. I've had a lot of experiences recently that have kind of followed the same pattern. And I don't know if there maybe is some kind of astrological correlation, maybe some aspects that I have, or maybe some transits that I have going on, or maybe something with synastry or composite that I have with these people, or maybe something in their own transits. Because, you have to remember that, like, well, people are going through their own transits and their own experiences. And so sometimes they take certain things out on like other people because of the experiences that they're having. But I think what it comes down to really is that there is a lack of compassion. that at least I'm trying to understand where these people are coming from, but I feel like they don't always understand or try to understand where like other people like myself are coming from. So if they have decided that, well, being a vegetarian is pointless or like bad or whatever it is, or stupid or whatever, then it's like I don't think he in any way tried to understand like why I was a vegetarian, even though I did explain to him a few of my reasons why I was. There were several reasons why I was a vegetarian. Some of them were personal, some of them were a bit less personal. But how can you say that you don't understand why I was a vegetarian when I've literally explained to you why I was a vegetarian? So it's just kind of like this confusing thing, and I think most people don't think so logically, or they just kind of say things. They don't necessarily think it through. They don't notice where they're contradicting themselves. They don't notice where they're maybe being disrespectful or something, or showing lack of compassion. So I think it is important to kind of practice compassion, but how do you tell someone that, hey, you need to be more compassionate? Because like this person that I was talking to online said, I can't help being a cold person. That's who I am. And so it's kind of like I have to be compassionate about that as well. I have to be compassionate that, somebody else might have different experiences in life that makes them less compassionate, or makes them, feel a certain way about certain things that may seem judgmental to me or something. But like I'm human too, and so I have my experiences, and you kind of say like, well, be the change. You hear people say, be the change that you want to see in the world. So if I think that if I think that people should be more compassionate or something like that, then I should embody that. And so I try to understand different perspectives and, show compassion and be open-minded about people. But I feel like oftentimes a lot of people don't really think in those terms, because they have it in their head that they know what's right or something, that they know that, being vegetarian is stupid or something. So then it's kind of like, well, it's almost like an attack on my space then, if you're still serving me meat and like shoving meat into my freezer or something like he did, even though I'm a vegetarian. Like, why would you invade my space like and do something that it's almost hostile in that way? Like, if you don't understand something, you're allowed to ask about it. And I did explain why I was a vegetarian, but it's kind of like, well, if you don't understand something about it, just ask me, instead of just, shoving it in my face that you don't agree with it. I just see a lot of lack of compassion in the world in general, even like in, on the internet, in comments. Sometimes I read these comments online and everybody's just yelling at each other, and I realize that people are allowed to express themselves, and the internet is a good place to express yourself in a way, because you can hide behind, different usernames and like blank profiles or whatever, and you can express your views. People are more likely to do that sometimes on the internet than in real life. But, well, real life, what does that mean? But you know what I mean. But it's like, I can't deal with the constant lack of compassion after a while, because people are just always like, they think that people, obviously they have a right to express themselves, and like I say, the internet is a good chance to do that. But then I feel like people who are trying to show compassion might be like seen as weak, or you're being, a weakling or whatever it is. But like, those people are also people. The compassionate ones are also people who are also allowed to have their views and their expressions of themselves. So I feel like the people that come across much stronger in general, they're sort of quote unquote allowed to express themselves more than the people that are more, into showing compassion or something. The nice people get kind of left behind or ignored, because they're not being as, what people consider strong, or they're not being as out there. So if you're a nice person, sometimes you get sort of put on the sidelines. So I could probably say more, but I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you for listening. I hope somebody got something out of this, and I hope it was interesting for somebody. And yeah, leave a like if you like this, and subscribe if you want more from me. Thank you.